So on the writing of Hathor, there's more exciting information on the revelations that are occurring of things that we have in society that are much more revealed than ever before by looking at the information of the symbolism. So we have other initiations that point to clues of things that occurred with the great gods, the superheroes. Uh, there is the Ankh symbol, of course, that we must understand what it is really. It was a shape of a cross. However, it wasn't really a cross, there was a loop on the top of it. And the cross symbolizes the vastness of the all that is, because it is seemingly nothing through the center. Like when you look at the great void in the night sky, where we create from, according to Stargate of Success teaching, there's an actual physics of creation, how we create from the vacuum into the ether, and it comes down as the quantum field all around us of manifestation. So the ancient ones knew how to do this. So when they would take in the great temples in the artwork one of these Ankh symbols and place it in the mouth of another initiate, what it meant is that they were consuming the greatest meal that they would ever have, which was of the all that is, an initiation to have the power. And the cross shape really is of a person with their arms outstretched, just golden humanity with a shining nervous system, brain, the golden being. And in ancient Egypt, they had gold all around them in the temples, on the ornaments, the jewels that they wore, everything. So it was a big part of the culture, which reflected back at them their inner divine nature of an awakened brain, this great, huge, tall god. Very sad story. I mean, they were cast out of their tombs later, thrown out of the tombs around Giza and other places. Smaller statues were placed there. And we found in the hills around the great structures of the temples the bodies hidden, buried in unmarked shallow graves beneath the sand. Great, huge giants, some of whom were over 100 feet tall in the different periods of the Egyptian dynasties. So it was really, really quite remarkable what happened, and why these great giants were lost to any kind of record or archive. Even the Smithsonian covered it up. They found giant statues, and there was no records. So likely the raiders took all of the jewels and adornments, melted it down, took it. There's really nothing on Earth that is left as an artifact from the times of the great tall ones. There was a few that were found with these large solar gold disc-like jewels on them, necklaces, sort of, and adornments, and pins like that were left with the skeletons. Only a handful, and otherwise there was not very much at all. So that was the great ones that were lost later, who had in the very beginning the Ankh symbol, which was the foundation of tying it all together. That big staff they had that had a hook on the bottom of it was symbolically tying things in the quantum field, uh, completing initiations to tie together to the supremacy of the knowledge within of the great all that is, seemingly nothing, you see. So it uh, was not really about death. And there's some inaccuracies that happened as well in terms of later dynasties, which I wrote about, fabrications about things that weren't there, mixing of the periods. Like the Book of the Dead was really funerary rites, mentioning Osiris and some of the earlier gods that were not in the same lifetime with him as those people, because Anubis and Hathor and Amun and Tehuti was later also known as Hermes, with the staff of the snake climbing up the pole, which is a symbol of medicine. And what they basically did is they had those people in an earlier age, you see, depicted on the temple walls around Dendra, Luxor, Karnak, all those different places. And later in the Book of the Dead, they had funerary rites. So they didn't really have the same teachings about the immortality later as clearly with the technology as they did earlier. Uh, and so there was a lost information, adding people like Seti and Osiris, who were later in the period before we had Anubis and the other gods. It makes a difference because it clarifies history, what actually happened, what actually did not. Where was it teaching about the immortality, where there was teaching later about funerary rites, and some of the immortality information was missing. So it was hilarious, though. They had a sense of humor. I mentioned in the Great Sphinx, there was a security chamber. You see, Anubis was the great god of funerary rites and embalming, all of this kind of stuff. But it wasn't all. He was also in charge of the area of the Sphinx, where he had the embalming main room chamber, and he tended to the gold as well. Underneath, there were tunnels that were wheeled trolleys to the different pyramids to store the gold. So he would oversee it, and it was hilarious because he would be there. There was the guardian lions or whatever he used there as well, like be with him, because if anybody came in or broke in to rob or to get at the gold, they were killed, and they would be embalmed and they would be buried. So it was a deterrent to rob any of the chambers where the gold was, because he had to face to face with Anubis or his guards, wild animals, like they would rip them to pieces and they bury them. So it was really quite well thought out in terms of keeping intruders out. And the whole culture was based on the initiations, the different initiations that we had. So, for example, the Hathor mask of the cow. It's interesting because today, when we talk about the herd or the herd mind, which is the collective, back then it was to make the herd or the collective there want to be the initiate, you see. So when you come to the cities where people were initiated into the great creation of the fixtures of light that lit up the cities one by one, and the ones that participated had the Hathor mask adorning the pillars of their great cities. And so the herd would gather, you see, and they would look upon this as a representation of themselves one day knowing this technology and being greater and being initiates potentially, because they kept the initiation temples open. So there were great people in the business community and all kinds of people who also got to be in the great temples. It started with the families and all the royal families, the children, and then also community people got to participate to take on technologies that were actually initiated into, such as the creation of the pedestals that lit up and were wired from within, and also the rites of Mot and Tahuti, husband and wife, who were parents of Amun, who was the father of Osiris. Sorry, not Osiris. Was not the father of Osiris. Was the father of Horus, the husband of Hathor. See, and they had this fantastic initiation chamber where you would see a scale, and on the scale would be a human heart, and on the other side would be a feather. So anybody heavy-hearted with any kind of problem, you put into the initiation temple, which both Tahuti and Mat have the exact matching kinds of initiation temples. They're both the same. So you'd go in there and you would have this experience of coming to terms with what was so problematic. See, that you were heavy-hearted and you could not be light as the feather to manifest the golden humanity within, the golden god. Now, there's some speculation that Anubis received those people who were heavy-hearted that failed initiation, growing up because they're upset about something terrible. They would go to him and they would bear hard labor, mining for gold in the mines. They would lift the heavy gold and put it into the stacks and put it into the carts to be wheeled. And they would labor to realize after they got out of there how much less they weighed, in fact, how light they were, in order to appreciate their joyfulness of being alive and being blessed, no matter what sort of tumultuous times they'd undergone or what sort of sadness they were bearing, what was really so terrible. So they did use great humor to help people back on a correct attitude, mind of conducting themselves as a citizen of all important Egyptian cultures in those times. And so they would make their ways to the different initiation temples, where there was a variety of different things that were taught in those days, and they shared great laughter and great evolution fruits of those with one another, with different families in different cities. And they were basically a collaboration of mind that way. And Bastet with Ptah, they had spacecraft technology with Horus, and Horus, or the big decanter of wine, of being mind, like the wine flowing through the veins of the great Pharaoh, a great fermentation of experience of his initiatory prowess with both the eye of Horus, which is what we call the camera eye moon matrix now. We also have extra teachings now from these pharaohs who have reincarnated to tell their stories. And so the initiations and mysterious initiations in all of these different temples all over the region were for a specific purpose, to help bring unity and also new technologies that they shared. So if we look at information about them now, or people thought, well, there's religious worship in there. Not really, if you're wiring a pedestal with light bulbs and electricity from within to light your city. So if you're a light in the world, then perhaps you would tell people about the initiation temple, and they would try. It was technology, a lot of it, and the nature of their community strength of imparting wisdom and information to common people. Even the most common people were buried with writing on the wall about their accomplishments or initiations, what they learned, what was still not learned. Everyone had these, was part of the burial rites. So, and that went all through ancient Egypt. So if you read the history books, it doesn't tell you any of this. It just tells you that there was a cult or religion that they prayed to the sun. That's pretty much all it tells you, or that there were different gods that they worshipped or prayed to, these different deities and costumes. It isn't what it was. No one worshipped or prayed to them. They would be initiating leaders in their society that would teach people something of value. And so that's what it was. So in the writing of this great epic, what we're finding is that we are reclaiming our heritage of initiatory information of early society that became symbolically foundation symbols that were used after the time of Inanna in Mesopotamia, the great goddess Mason, into the time of Hathor, which was passed on into many of the dynasties in later Egyptian culture. So when you see it, it will set off likely memories of things that ring a bell or jog some memory, in order to reclaim some of the things that each and every person has reincarnated, open to remembering certain things that have been lost for hundreds and thousands of years in the time of the great, huge, tall gods. When you see these skeletons, it is very humbling when you see a man, sitting basically inside a cranium of a huge, monstrous skeleton that was found excavating. They were enormous. And take all of that neurology and then compress it into these brains. We're almost microscopic in size in comparison. It's unbelievable. So I'm continuing the writing of this great epic. And it is an interesting movie. The children came through that they brought with great humor that are depicted in the film, as well as the ending, which has an explanation as to how some of the ones who had immortal power perished as well, because if there was any kind of shock or trauma, it was very fast to those great big people who processed more slowly than us. We have faster reflexes now. If there's a rock that hits somebody in the head so hard that you're bleeding and dead on the ground, it's hard to save yourself, when you are, say 60 feet tall and processing like this, and boom, you're dead and there's blood all over. Because my memory is that Hathor died from what happened is she had a fight with Horus about something, ran away outside, was running up an incline, and there was a shake. Something happened. There was rock shaking, and boulder came down and hit her, and she was squashed that fast, flattened, skull crushed, and was not found right away. And they finally went to find her, and she was dead. And so this was a woman who had immortal flight. She was amazing, as was Horus. And Horus, it was Horus's soulmate, and he died later of a broken heart, missing his soulmate so much. So there was ways that some of the great ones that were speculated to be immortals, maybe they flew away with spaceships, maybe they were. But we come back, we reincarnate, and we remember our stories. So it was a shock to me, actually, that it was really us on Earth, most of us. And even the Andromeda said, there's no people from Earth that are living anywhere else. It's just us. You guys died. There's no trace of you. And the only way that, there's no one, not a single person. And that's also incorrect in New Age teachings. Because with all the spaceships flying, I haven't seen a single person. And there's no one, So they're gone. And the Andromedans agree that they're gone, and people shouldn't pretend that they're on big spaceships teaching somewhere, because they're not. There's just us on these little dinky videos. Big movies we've written to tell you people later, about it, so that you have a point of reference for some of it. And some of us had very little means and just sat in our rooms with great mind and put all this together for over 20 years for you, which is me. And so I'm a scholarly person, and so I do my work and other things. And yes, during these crazy times with the spacecraft engagement. So it's pretty much where we're at. And it's a very lovely story. And I hope that you enjoy it when it comes out. And I hope you enjoyed more on ancient Egypt in the times of Hathor, Horus, the Elder.